The sunshine of mid-August seems so long ago. That's when Take Flight Alaska at Merrill Field made the offer to show us how to fly airplanes.
And you go ahead and go around to the left side.
27-year-old Stacy Horn is our instructor. I was ready to climb in, take off, and fly. That's where I learned the first lesson.
Your checklists are located in this pocket right here.
Before you ever take off, you do an extensive pre-flight inspection. And anything to do with anything about airplanes has a checklist.
Okay.
And what you're looking for is to make sure that everything's in place, it's not loose.
We checked the fuel for water contamination. We made sure we had enough oil.
And go ahead and swing it to the right.
Finally, we climbed in. We worked our way through the pre-taxi checklist.
Okay, next thing.
The pre-takeoff checklist.
Merrill Tower, Cessna 2374 Echo.
And then while Stacy controlled the rudder, she let me add the power and pull back on the yoke. We lifted off from Merrill Field.
Accelerating 76 knots.
For Stacy Horn, this is her first job as a professional pilot. She dreams of flying jet airliners.
What made you want to become an instructor pilot? Or is this just kind of a logical step in the careers of many pilots?
Yeah, it's unless you go military, you have to find a way to build hours in order to move on in this industry. And the most logical step is as a flight instructor.
We flew to a practice area near Goose Bay and did some maneuvers, gentle turns, climbs, and descents. It was surprisingly easy.
It really doesn't take much to be able to, once you're in the air, to fly. I mean, I've never flown before, and here I am, chugging along.
The airplane pretty much flies itself. What is the big thing is learning what to do if something happens. And it's all judgment. I mean, you can teach a monkey how to fly, but you can't necessarily teach them judgment of what to do in certain situations. And that's what what being a pilot is all about.
What's the most difficult part about flying, do you think, for a beginner?
For a beginner, landing.
What's landing?
Landing.
When we flew back to Merrill Field, Stacy Horn did the landing.
We're going to fly down to the runway, and then we're going to level off a little bit, and we'll look at the end of the runway, and we're just not going to let the nose wheel touch. Just like that.
HCSKDV.
Before you're allowed to fly an airplane, you have to prove to the FAA you're not likely to keel over at the controls.
Any problem with your heart? Have you ever had rheumatic fever? Ever been told that you have a heart murmur?
Dr. George Stewart is a senior aviation medical examiner.
It allows the pupil to dilate, giving you a better view of what's at the back of the eye, at the fundus of the eye. Well, good luck to you.
All right,
Your
Doctor.
certificate.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the training with flight instructor Stacy Horn goes on. In the initial stages, the main concern is just becoming familiar with the airplane, in this case a Cessna 152. To get your private pilot's license, the FAA requirements include a total of 40 hours of flight time. 20 have to be with an instructor. You need 10 hours of solo time, 5 hours of cross-country flying, and at least 3 hours of instrument training. The flight training also includes something I had no desire to do: stalling the airplane.
Go ahead and stall the aircraft. Go ahead and turn your carb heat on. There you go. Power comes back. I want you to keep it up. There it goes. Full power. Nose back up over the horizon. Flaps at 20. Back on heading west.
Days of heavy rain couldn't keep us down. We would stay near Merrill Field, practicing takeoffs and landings.
It hinders visibility some, but other than that, as far as how the airplane flies, it doesn't change how the airplane flies. It just makes it harder for a pilot to see other things around him.
We practiced touch and goes by the dozen, preparing for the time when Stacy Horn had the confidence to turn me loose on my own for my first solo flight.
Hold it up. There. Look at that. Dead on the center line. Okay, go ahead and go.
You will go up with me. We'll see how your landings are today, and weather permitting, if everything looks good,
Clear!
then we'll do your first supervised solo.
The most difficult part about flying an airplane is getting back down on the ground. It was September 16th. I'd been in Take Flight Alaska's program 1 month. I had accumulated nearly 20 hours of flight time. But I still had to convince flight instructor Stacy Horn I could handle the landings on my own.
Okay, show me a good one.
All
We flew the traffic pattern over Merrill Field, trying to perfect the landings.
Do not do this. Do not push that nose down when we're on the ground. It's okay to let the plane ride the bumps, but don't let it drift you off center line. Okay?
Okay.
I've got to see you maintain the center line to solo you, so I know that you're not going to go off the side of the runway.
One touch and go after another.
Light on those rudders. You were right on the center line. You gave it a whole bunch of left rudder. I have no idea why.
I don't either.
They started getting better.
That was very nice. We were a little bit right of center line, so you had a little bit too much of a slip in. But actually, at the end, it worked out pretty good because if we could just really on the surface, we're getting drifted right back to the left. So it worked out pretty good, but that was very, very nice. So I wanted to see a couple more of those.
Stacy says she knows a student is ready when she can take her hands off the controls, relax, and look out the window. Finally, I wasn't scaring her anymore. She told me to land and taxi to the control tower. She was ready to turn me loose. I prepared the plane for takeoff, overcome by anxiety. Stacy watched from the control tower, just as nervous as I was.
Actually, I get very, very nervous when I first solo somebody, and my knees shake. I tend to be more nervous than the student is.
In the twilight of Merrill Field, I took off. 3 takeoffs and landings. They weren't pretty, but I was more concerned about survival than soft landings. 15 minutes later, I had accomplished one of the most exciting events for a pilot, the first solo.
In the open days of open cockpits, you couldn't hear the instructor talk to the pilot, and the pilot usually sat in front of the instructor. So how they gave instructions was by tugging on their shirt. And once the student soloed, that meant that he didn't need the instructor tugging on his shirt to give him instructions anymore. There you go.
Learning how to control an airplane in flight is only part of what is required to become a pilot. You are expected to know the federal aviation regulations that apply to private pilots. You also need to know the operating limitations of the plane you're flying, how to figure out local airport procedures, weather patterns, and aeronautical charts. That's why most student pilots go to some sort of a ground school. Well, airplane manufacturer Cessna is trying to make the process a little more user-friendly.
We've talked a lot about stalls already, but now...
A set of 32 interactive CD-ROMs.
It's 44 feet above sea level.
In addition, at Take Flight Alaska on Merrill Field,
Our automated surface observation system.
flight instructor Stacy Horn hammers away at the information you're required to learn.
The Common Traffic Advisory frequency, so that's on the radio.
This is my first solo cross-country, and so I made up a log, flight log, of where the route is going to be. I go down. After completing my first solo flight and notching some more hours in my logbook, I was ready for the next challenge, the cross-country flight. Destination, Kenai. I have certain checkpoints that I have to look down and make sure I'm maintaining my time, and that will keep me on track, keep me from getting lost, and it should take me, according to my calculations in the weather report that I got from the FAA, it should take me about 42 minutes to fly down there. We'll burn about 4.5 gallons of fuel, and it's 64 miles.
Are you at all nervous?
A little nervous, more excited than nervous. I've kind of had other flights that made me nervous, and I've gotten over that, so kind of not so nervous now, just kind of excited, and it's a really nice day to fly. You're required to have a total of 5 hours of solo cross-country time. We accomplished ours with this flight to Kenai and one to Homer. 105. Remember all that high school geometry you thought you'd never use? Well, it pays off planning cross-country flights. The FAA requires at least one cross-country flight with your instructor at night. Instructor Stacy Horn and I prepared for a night flight to Homer. Turn there. So this is the not-so-fun part of flying. Come out here at night, it's about 15 degrees, and frost is built up on the wings, so you're going to have to come out here with a broom, sweep all that frost off, because that will affect the lift on the plane. You won't be able to fly as well. Flying at night when you can't see your charts without a flashlight makes navigating especially challenging. But slowly we ticked off the requirements and neared the end of this journey, begun in August.
Okay, go ahead and have a seat.
Take Flight Alaska has a special room for the computer-based written test, 60 questions. You have to answer 70% correct to pass, but more than that, the fear of failing on television is a great motivator. I passed. The challenge ahead, the oral exam and the check ride with an FAA certified examiner. Instructor Stacy Horn drilled me on the required maneuvers, such as slow flight, flying the plane as slow as 40 knots, but still maintaining altitude.
Pitch your nose up for the stall horn. As you do, you're going to bring a little bit of the power back to maintain your altitude. Remember, pitch is going to control your airspeed, power is going to control your altitude. Horn should be coming on any minute. Okay, you got to descent, give it some power. Just a tad, just a tad, just a tad, a little bit more, be aggressive.
Ever get tired of flying around up here?
No, that's much better than working for a living.
We went flying with instructor Holly Beatty. Holly got her pilot's license at age 17. Now at age 20, she instructs students at Take Flight Alaska.
Okay, head to the side.
We practiced emergency landing procedures and instrument flying, then returned to Merrill Field for more touch and goes, refining and sharpening the skills we'd learned since embarking on the program 3 months earlier.
Always be thinking ahead of the airplane. It's not enough just to be caught up, and if you're behind, you're definitely going to be in trouble.
To get to this point, it took us 3 months and 5 days. We had logged nearly 53 hours of flight time, and the cost of the program, just over $4,200. A final landing, and we were ready. So we hoped.
Let's go ahead and get started with your private pilot oral examination, Jason. I expect you to screw some things up. Almost everybody does when they're taking a flight test. But if there are control skill deficiencies or if there are judgment deficiencies, then the person needs more training.
FAA certified examiner Michael Buckland speaks softly, but for private pilot wannabes, he carries a big stick.
Now, why would an airplane stall? What's going to bring that
When
about?
the plane exceeds its critical angle of attack.
The oral examination tests your knowledge on regulations, aircraft performance, atmosphere and weather conditions.
What about humidity? Will that have an effect on your performance?
Well, there will be more water in the air. I would venture to say that it would decrease performance, but I'm not completely sure.
It wasn't easy, but after an hour of questioning, we passed, earning the right to move on to the next exam. This one in the air.
Off, throttle, idle, ignition switch off, master switch on.
Our FAA check ride started with the pre-flight inspection at Take Flight Alaska on Merrill Field. Examiner Michael Buckman looking on and questioning.
What are you looking for here on the flaps? I'm looking to make sure all these connections are on, and it doesn't look like there's any flaws, and that it has controlled pressure.
We took off, Buckland offering some assuring words to calm my nerves.
Remember, you're passing a check ride, not a kidney stone.
We headed out to the practice area across Knik Arm. He would test me on slow flight, stalls, and steep turns.
So we'll do a steep turn around to the left, and then rolling out, we'll go into one to the right. I'm going to have to tell Stacy her hard work has paid off as you're holding the altitudes accurately.
But it wasn't perfect.
Let's do a left turn to 180 on slow flight. Still need to clear for traffic, even during slow flight. People tend to forget it there, you get absorbed in the instruments.
When Michael Buckland's not giving FAA check rides, he teaches philosophy.
Any idea what mouse milking is, Jason? Mouse milking? Yes. Have you heard the term? I have not. It's one that I use, but about 80 years ago, old-time aviators had a saying that you fly an airplane as gently as if you're milking a mouse into a little thimble. In other words, just very gently. And that's one of the aspects in flying that pilots need to cultivate. You're doing it well in flight. I notice on the ground you're doing what most pilots do, which is kind of there are lurches and from the time the engine starts until it stops, there really shouldn't be any rough edges or bumps at all. Your passenger should be completely comfortable, and that's mouse milking.
We flew back to Merrill Field for some touch and goes, and after an hour and 12 minutes, a final landing, and it was over. I passed.
All right.
You got it?
The main compliments go to Stacy because she did the hard work.